Hello, everyone. Welcome to Achieving Success with Olivia Atkin. I am your host, Olivia Atkin. Each week, we will discuss the roadmap of achieving your personal and professional success. We give you real-life stories on growing personally and professionally to achieve your life and career goals with the help of some top-notch guests. Today, we are speaking with actor Jocko Sims and Dr. Nia Mitchell. Introducing Jocko Sims, an actor, producer known for his roles in New Amsterdam, How to Die Alone, The Last Ship, and The Resident. Beyond his acting career, Jocko is deeply committed to giving back to his communities. He serves as an ambassador for Hidden Heroes, a foundation established by the Elizabeth Dole Foundation to support caregivers of wounded or ill veterans. Additionally, Jocko started the More Black Doctors initiative that supports increasing the representation of Black doctors in the healthcare system. Currently, he's working with Dr. Nia S. Mitchell from the Mile High Medical Society to raise funds for the Charles J. Blackwood Endowed Memorial Scholarship Fund, supporting Black medical students at the University of Colorado. Now let's turn our attention to Dr. Nia S. Mitchell, MD, MPH. Dr. Mitchell earned her medical degree from Washington University in St. Louis and completed her residency and research fellowship at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus. She's an associate professor of general internal medicine at Duke University, focusing her research on weight loss interventions for underserved populations. Dr. Mitchell's dedication to improving healthcare access and outcomes for minority communities is commendable, and her contribution to the field of medicine is invaluable. Hello, Jocko and Nia. It's fantastic having you both on the show today.
So good to be with you, Olivia. Thank you.
And to start off the show, I want to say how exciting this is, not just because I know how impactful our conversation is going to be today, but this is also the first time in the episodes that we have done, and since the show has started, that we have two unbelievable guests with us and not just one. So I really wanted to highlight that first for the show. And now let's dive into things. To start off the show, can you tell me what success means and looks like to Jocko Sims and then to Dr. Nia Mitchell?
Wow. Success, I guess, for me it can obviously be defined in a lot of ways. I'm sure you trip up a lot of people with this question. One way for me is to find something that you love to do and do it to be able to do it. I think for me that feels good, and that's one of the many definitions of success.
I love that. And I think it's really important to be able to make that impact and do what makes you feel good and feel like you're fulfilling. And I love that answer. Dr. Mitchell, can you tell us what your thoughts are?
Sure. So when I think of success as a physician, I think of, helping my patients achieve their best lives, right? And sometimes that means, they may not return to their baseline let's say if they've had a stroke or something like that, but like, how can we make sure that they are living the best life that they can given their current circumstances? And so I think people take health for granted until it's gone. And so I think helping people achieve their best health is what I see as success.
And I love that. And this is something I'm going to take a hot minute to stop for a second and say this, because this is something that in conversations we were having before the show, I did not mention to Jocko or Nia, but with Nia's answer, I really want to highlight this. She highlighted the fact that we have our health until it can be taken away sometimes. And in those moments, it really can define us. As some of the listeners know, because I've touched upon this in the past and when I've been on other podcasts, at 9 years old, I was diagnosed with a rare form of epilepsy. My epilepsy, even now, it's not talked about. It's a very common neurological disease, but it's hard to diagnose. It's hard to navigate. And for each patient, it can look very different. And we're talking 20 years ago, I was diagnosed, and it looked very different back then. And my seizures were all over the place and they weren't controlled. And so I went from that star athlete at 9 years old training for the Junior Olympics to not even being able to be in a pool because I might drown, and not no one knowing how that can really affect or when it would hit. So for me, I very much understand the aspect of like life can change and life can pivot, but also making sure that, like you mentioned, that baseline that we touch upon, it might not go back to your old normal, but let's create the new normal, whatever that might look like. And I think that's really important. So I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think no matter where we are in our life and how we pivot, right, with career moves or anything, it's about finding what that new baseline really is and how that shapes us. Jocko, I'd like to take a minute to dive into your experiences, both as an actor and a philanthropist. Can you share when you realized your passion for acting and what drove your journey to take it to where it is today?
Yeah, incidentally, I guess when I was in high school, I wanted to be a doctor, like Dr. Nia here. And I was so sure that I'd be a doctor that I had a medical symbol put on my customizable high school ring. And I was excited about it until I got to college my first year in undergrad. And I was just like, I don't want to be here for the next 12 years. I want to find something else. And although my mom told me all throughout middle school and high school that I needed to take some creative classes and band and theater, I never did, but I finally did my first year in college, fell in love with it. And I moved to LA, finished up my degree in theater, BA in theater at UCLA, and went on my first audition and booked it. And went on my second audition and booked it. And I said, you know what? I feel like this is what I was meant to do. But I'd always wanted to play a doctor. And finally, that dream came true twice. I got to play one on The Resident right before I played Dr. Reynolds on New Amsterdam. So it's been quite a journey. And yeah, I feel like at the time that I was playing a doctor, I felt like I was living two dreams at once.
I was going to say, it really highlights both things that you were driving towards. And it demonstrates that sometimes moms do know best. They do have some insight.
Always.
They have that insight to go, okay, wait, I'm seeing something. Maybe we should lean into this. But it also demonstrates that how twists and turns we can have in life, and we can be so confident in that thing that we think is going to drive us and how we're going to make impact in the world. And it can be something totally different, and touching upon your roles, like you just did, playing a medical professional. You've now been on two very successful shows playing doctors. You've also played, military personnel and on shows, and many actors excel in their roles. And they don't then take that and go, okay, I'm embracing the role I'm in and now I'm going to pay it forward. Especially, and some do, you just don't hear about it and it doesn't get talked about. And I think it really is something that's remarkable, because you're seeing a character being played on TV, but most of the time you take that shield off, or that person you're embracing, and go, okay, I'm done my work for the day. However, you've extended that. You go, okay, this is who I'm playing, and now I'm about to get back to my communities that I represent on the screen. As a viewer of New Amsterdam, I won't lie, growing up in a household of medical physicians, some of my favorite shows are medical shows. I think that also plays into, at a young age, I got approval on a Bring Your Child to Work day to actually go in an OR. However, and I got to see some surgeries. However, I don't do good with blood. I learned that very young. You try to draw my blood and it's an ordeal. So I learned medical was not for me, and I could do my impact other ways. But I learned that I also love watching medical shows. So I am a fan of both The Resident and New Amsterdam, and I've watched it. And watching your character and how you are, to me, the passion just came off on how you really want to help individuals. And now just from watching it, you also have to go, okay, is this person just acting on screen? Now, after I've done my research and prepping for today, I wholeheartedly could say the person you play on screen really does get represented in your everyday life. And that's a genuine person. You're not just portraying a character. Though, for you, what made you bridge the gap between the characters you play on screen and making organizations and being so philanthropic around those characters you've played?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, I've not had someone notice that and point that out with the two shows. And starting with the last ship in both New Amsterdam, I got lucky to get uh, shows that had a community that was very supportive of what we were doing on screen. With the last ship, we had the full support of the United States Navy. We could not do that show without the Navy. Um, I got invited to the Pentagon. I became good friends with the Secretary of the Navy under President Obama. His name is Secretary Ray Mabus, and it just was incredible. Our poster was up at the Pentagon. So with that kind of support and getting to know the first time I stepped foot on a ship, and getting to know those young men and women in uniform, as young as 19 years old, who put their lives on the line for us. It's just real. You can't help but to be there and feel connected to them in some way. And they always showed us love and support. And when the opportunity presents itself, I feel like I'd like to take advantage of those opportunities and give back. And such as what's happened with the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, who focuses on military caregivers. And I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit later. And then with New Amsterdam, it's the same thing. I get to, as I just told you, I wanted to be a doctor. So just to be able to rub elbows with real life surgeons while I'm there in the OR was an incredible experience for me. And that show did a great job of informing its audience of so many of the important issues in healthcare and our healthcare system, particularly disparities. So I learned a lot. And once again, with this opportunity, you mentioned more Black doctors in the intro. I was inspired to do that because of Dr. Nia, who contacted me and told me about this amazing cause that she has going. So it's being at the right place, right time, doing well on the shows, and after a while, that energy sort of comes back to you. And I'm a sucker. I always say yes.
And what I think really you amplified in that answer is that it isn't just you represent a community. I think a lot of people forget sometimes that even when people are playing characters on TV, they are representing a community and how to accurately represent that community. Like you said, having the support of the naval community really demonstrated to you not that just the support you could have, but also what their lives are like and being able to connect with them in that way. And the other aspect you hit upon, especially with New Amsterdam, one reason I love New Amsterdam compared to other shows is that you do really see, what scenarios can come up in life, how there can be real discrepancies, how that I remember certain episodes where you're watching it and you're hitting scenarios that can come up in a trauma one scenario, a trauma one hospital, but you're also hitting scenarios that are actively hitting communities where it can be unjust, and there's nothing that community did to warrant necessarily the care that is currently being received to them, and how to navigate that and how individuals can think about that while also challenging the thoughts of like, this is what you might be currently thinking, but now I'm going to make you think about a different perspective while enjoying the show. So that is one reason why too I love watching it. Also, like, your character, even in New Amsterdam, is always thinking outside the box and challenging that status quo. And you see that even through the philanthropy that Dr. Nia and you are doing, is going, okay, well, this is and we'll dive into it in a little bit, of like, this is the standard, but why does this have to be the standard? So has that always been a part of who you are as an individual too?
Challenging the status quo, not so much. I think that was a lot of Dr. Reynolds and also, of course, Max Goodwin, the main character on New Amsterdam, played by Ryan Eggold. David Schulner, who created the show, just did a fantastic job. And of course, it's based on the real life of Dr. Eric Mannheimer, who wrote the book 12 Patients, Life and Death at Bellevue Hospital. He was the medical director at Bellevue, and he experienced all of these atrocities, I would say, when it comes to giving patients healthcare. And he realized that there's a lot of red tape, a lot of hurdles to jump through, and a lot of walls that are there to kind of stop you from giving Americans the care that they need. So David Schulner read that book, and he was blown away and felt that this was an opportunity for us to tell these type of stories on television. And shout out to Universal and NBC who gave it a shot, and kudos to personally kudos to David Schulner and Peter Horton for believing in us, and they did a great job casting it. I've been diving back into a couple of episodes because we're going to show one at Series Fest, and I was just blown away in a different way, having stepped away from it for a year or so, having not seen any episodes. But they just did a really good job with casting and making sure those characters were able to bring out those important elements where we were able to create something that had a lasting impression on folks. And it's just been an amazing journey.
And one thing too, and then we're going to sidestep to some more of your philanthropy, but I want to highlight representation is so important. And representation within the communities that you're serving is so important. And one thing that I think New Amsterdam does greater than a lot of other television shows, in my personal opinion, I don't want to just say that for everyone, but in my personal opinion, is the representation, not just by color, by religion, and also medical deficits that some people, I want to highlight this, some people see as a deficit that can really be a strength. You've characters on there that are deaf. You've had individuals on that show highlighting prominent characters and making an impact that have different medical disabilities, where as communities over time, we look at it as, well, that's negative. There's something wrong. They're not equal. And the show really highlights we all are equal. We all can bring something different due to the challenges we might have been born with, medically in these different avenues. But before we dive more into the medical philanthropy that you're doing, I want to also dive into as I mentioned in the introduction, the Elizabeth Dole Foundation. You annually co-host the Heroes and History Makers Gala in Washington DC, along with Tom Hanks, paying tribute to our nation's unsung heroes. Currently, you are deeply involved in a film project with the foundation, a project you've personally written and are directing that is centered around a story of a military caregiver and former NYPD officer, Chris Traumer, who made the difficult decision to retire early in order to care for his father, who is a Vietnam-era veteran struggling with stroke complications and PTSD. What has been that experience like for you, working on a film that shares so many personals? Like, those individuals have to really open up to you, and you're connecting to them on a very different level. Well, also, it's a passion for you giving back to this community and doing something that really drives you, as well as that acting side, the film creation side. And what impact has that had on you on camera, but also off screen?
Yeah, well, Senator Elizabeth Dole reached out, and I had to jump at that opportunity to be a part of this organization. And it started with hosting Military Kids Have Talent during the pandemic. And I said, "Oh yeah," so I shot everything here at home, and we did a couple of shows. And then shortly thereafter, they came to me and said, "Hey, we'd like you to, present some awards and whatnot at a gala, at the History and Hero Makers Gala with Tom Hanks." And I was like, "Who? Who's that?" No, just kidding. And I, of course, jumped at that opportunity, and it's just been great. They've been amazing. Each year we do the gala and we get to spotlight the 5.5 million military caregivers across the country. And a lot of the focus when we talk about, veterans is on them themselves, but we don't often think about the people at home who are taking care of them. They're unpaid. They often give up many aspects of their life. They have to drop out of school sometimes and quit their jobs, and it's a very difficult situation. So the Elizabeth Dole Foundation has just been amazing in that regard. This past year at the gala, I met and had the privilege of getting to know the story of Chris Traumer and his father, James, who, as you mentioned, is a Vietnam era veteran. And the story is just incredible. You actually can go on YouTube and type in Chris Traumer, and the first video that comes up, you can see a little piece that they put together at the Elizabeth Dole Foundation that I saw at the gala. But he had a very tumultuous childhood growing up when his father brought him from Vietnam to live here in the United States. And his father was rough. He was going through PTSD. He's had stroke complications since 2015. But despite his rough upbringing by his father, he had enough grace to decide to take care of him in his time of need. And it's just like, gosh, if Chris can do that, then we should all be able to step up for a loved one. It's incredible, and he and his family have been great, and I was inspired to write a story about it. And I have the support of the foundation, and we're in the process of making that happen. So it's just been incredible.
I love that and that story of how it all came about. So thank you for sharing that. And I joked before we started recording this how so many things that I saw in prepping for this show really intertwined with my life and how I view things. And again, something I didn't mention to Jocko or Nia is my spouse is in the military. So my boyfriend currently serves as a chief in the U.S. Coast Guard. So I have worked with military professionals, but it is very different when you're a military spouse, working, seeing everything firsthand, how certain things transpose. And he has talked openly with me. He's one of the youngest individuals to make chief. His growth was very different than a lot of individuals, but there's a lot of PTSD that's there from certain situations, being in certain environments. And it needs to be talked about, and it needs to be made in a situation where it's a safe space to actually go, this is a norm. Like PTSD, I think when PTSD, and I'd love to get your input, Jocko, when we first hear about it, and even in communities, it's like taboo. Oh, okay, PTSD. Because so many of us aren't aware of how it can shape us, how it can affect not just the people who serve, but spouses and families and everything else. When in reality, as long as you dive in it and create an open space, it can become such a healthy thing. And I think in some shape and form, we all deal with some form of PTSD from our own past experiences, especially when we don't deal with them or have the proper tools and resources at our fingertips to actually go through it. And I'd love to get your opinion on that, but I want to say first too, something you mentioned is we all hear so much about veterans and the military community, but the individuals we forget to also highlight are those caregivers, are those spouses, are those military brats that get moved around as a child. They might not have the same upbringing, so it could change their perspective. And I think it is something that I give you a lot of kudos in, because it does need to be talked about, not just the veteran community, but those relationships they have as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. As far as, I mean, Dr. Nia might be able to shed more light from a medical perspective on PTSD, but in relation to my experience with Chris Trauma and his family, you definitely see the ramifications of the effects of PTSD on the family and our story. And as they grow older, it's literally just passed on if it's not treated. But part of the problem with this particular family and with a lot of families is they're not aware of it, and that's what I want to do with this story is sort of point out that there might be some factors that you see that you can determine that this may be, if it's not PTSD, it could be depression, and it doesn't have to just be people obviously from the military. A lot of people associate, PTSD with veterans. But as you mentioned, we all experience it in our own right. So I think just with this story, we want to make sure that we highlight that and let all the other caregivers out there in the country know that they're not alone. A lot of male caregivers don't even know that they are caregivers. They don't even want to open up about their experiences. So this is a great opportunity here to sort of get that conversation going.
And I think you're right. A lot of time we think about taking on the care of a sibling, a child, right? If a certain child has disabilities where they cannot function without a caregiver, or a parent when they might get to that point, is like, okay, well, I'm the son of this person. I'm the daughter of this person. Like, that's just what you do.
Mm-hmm.
But there are caregiver aspects that, like, yeah, it's wonderful that as the child or the son of that parent going through something, you recognize and you go, okay, it's time for me to step in. I need to help. I need to be there. But you are a caregiver. And I think too, you brought up the point as well, is like, especially men, they don't even identify as being caregivers a lot of the time. And Jocko, you mentioned this, so now I'm going to throw the ball to Dr. Nia a bit and put it on. But tell us your thoughts on PTSD, more from the medical side.
Sure. So I do want to say that I feel like, as you both mentioned, PTSD is, it's post-traumatic stress disorder, right? But I think, it's really, I think we should call it like post-traumatic trauma, because we experience trauma. It's not always as obvious as someone who's been in the military, who's seen people die in front of them, or who may have been involved in some dramatic explosion that they keep reliving. It could be like someone being involved in a car accident could be experiencing PTSD. Someone who experienced abuse at home could experience PTSD. So I think, we do need to recognize that it happens in all areas, but also that there's treatment, right? And so the treatment can include not just medication, but counseling. And I think it's an ongoing thing, because some people are like, well, that happened so long ago, why aren't you over it? Well, if the person's never really processed it and able to like sort of relive it in a way that they no longer feel threatened by it, so that they can move on, they can continue to re-experience those symptoms over and over again. And so I really think we need to have some sympathy for folks who are experiencing that, and some understanding.
And I think having understanding and sympathy and empathy and going, okay, this is bigger than me. What is going on? Mm-hmm. How can we navigate this together? Instead of going, okay, well, now you're isolated. I'm over here, you're over there. Deal with it, get over it. Just like, it's on you. Mm-hmm. No, how can we become a unit? How can we team up to actually navigate through this, so that not only is there that healthy resolution for the individual having PTSD, but then the individuals around them know how to navigate that as well. And I think that's a big piece that we all, due to traumas we might have or experiences that we might face in life, forget to actually openly, and I don't want to say forget, but sometimes it's a fear of misunderstanding. Don't feel confident in the space we're in to actually share that and enlighten others about that, which could then end up shaping relationships we have. And I think it's really important to take a step back sometimes and go, okay, that person might have reacted a way I really don't understand today. And I might have never even seen that person react that way. But is there something bigger at play? Is there something that I might not even know is going on? And how can I positively communicate, hey, this seems like the outlier in this situation. Is everything okay? And I want to dive in now to the philanthropy you're both working on. And as Jocko mentioned earlier, Dr. Nia, you reached out to Jocko. So I'm going to start with you, and I'm going to flip this more on you first of what got you involved and really bringing awareness to the differentials in the underserved communities, and especially since the philanthropy is about getting more African American individuals into medical school, because there are discrepancies not just in healthcare, but what that representation looks like. So for you, what kind of got the ball rolling for you? And then how did you decide Jocko was the right person?
So, so what got the ball rolling for me is that, so I went to the University of Colorado for my residency and fellowship and my first faculty position. And when I was there, the local chapter of the National Medical Association started. So that's an association that represents Black medical providers across the country. And we were getting our local chapter restarted, and we were invited to an awards banquet, and they were giving a diversity scholarship, and the diversity scholarship was going to a white woman, one, and an Asian male. And I was like, well, this is interesting. I thought we'd get diversity with having African American and Black students. And it turns out that, diversity takes on several different flavors, right? So in that particular instance, the young woman was from a rural area. So, there's rural areas are underrepresented. And then in Colorado, Asians are underrepresented in medicine. And so that was the case. But I was like, well, I really think, I understand that, but I really think it's important that we get more scholarships for Black medical students. And I was like, how can we get this started? And so I went to the development office at the University of Colorado, and I said, so tell me how can I start a scholarship? And at that time, any group could go and decide to start a scholarship. And if they wanted to raise at least $100,000, the office of the president would then match those funds. And so I went around and asked people if they'd be willing to donate $1,000 a year for 5 years, because you could do it over 5 years. And we were able to get that money. People who said that they would pledge over about 3 months, we got the $100,000. And then I was like, well, this is great. And we got the matching funds. But then I was like, well, now what? Because once we get rid of that money, once we disperse that money, it's gone. So then I was like, well, tell me about an endowment. And so with an endowment, for those of you who don't know, you have a large sum of money, and then you get to only use the principal of that money in order to, so you have this endowment, the scholarship then in perpetuity. So they said, in order to do that, I said, I want a full tuition scholarship. What do I need to raise to give full tuition scholarship? And they said, you need to raise $1 million. And I was like, okay, we're going to raise $1 million. And then I realized that even raising $1 million, that's only one person for 4 years. And so I was like, actually, I want a scholar a year. So they said, well, then you need to raise $4 million. And I was like, okay, I'll raise $4 million. Now, again, I had never done this before, so it's really easy to say, yes, I'll just do that. And then when you're faced with the reality, you're like, wait, $4 million is a lot of money. And so then at that time, I went to the dean's office and said, this is what we're trying to do. And, we were able to get $100,000 matched by the president's office. What can the dean's office do? And so they said, well, the dean said, well, if you raise $2 million, I'll give you 2. And so then that started this journey. It's like, we need to now raise $2 million. And so, we were able to reach our first goal in February of 2021 of $1 million, and that got matched. And we were also lucky at the time that the school, there were certain entities at the school that were like, yes, we want to support you. Even though the money isn't all here yet, we want to support you with scholars now. So we actually had scholars starting as early as 2017 was our first scholar, but then we had more scholars, and we wanted one scholar per year. They're like, we will support 4 scholars in this year. So that was amazing. So that went really well. And so how I got into touch with Jocko, okay, so I hope this does not offend Jocko. So he was not the only actor I contacted. He was just the only one that responded. I went on basically this email writing campaign, and I'm like, okay, we got to the first million, we need to get to the second million. I'm like, I don't know anybody with big money. But I'm like, there are actors who play doctors on TV and in film, and like maybe they know somebody and they can help us out. And so, like I said, I reached out to a lot of people, but Jocko's the one who responded.
Oh, sorry. And I was going to say, and I think that says a lot about Jocko as an individual that, I see that a lot of times too, working formally in professional sports in different areas. A lot of times people get an email and they're like, okay, on to the next. Like, this is not significant. I'm not taking my time out of the day to even respond. And Jocko did. And I think that says a lot about him as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Back to Nia.
No, so he responded, and and I've said before, I didn't know what I was doing. I'm just sending emails. And so he's like, well, we need to come up with a campaign. And I'm like, a campaign? I'm like, I just want you to do something on social media. I don't know. Like, I don't know anything about campaigns. And so he was like, no, this needs a campaign. And then he had his big idea for Series Fest. And so that is how we got on this journey together.
And
yes.
I love to, I want to mention how Dr. Nia, it started from you, in that story demonstrates how you can start with trying to make a small impact. It doesn't matter. You can have this great impact you want to make on the world, but you need to start with the first step and go, I see the problem. How can this is where I'm seeing the resolution. How can we even get from point A to point B? Like, what is that first thing? And I think so many of us see issues in our environments or discrepancies with representation or just information that is out there in general. But we don't take this step to go, okay, how can I help relieve this gap, this, discrepancy I'm seeing? What is one small thing I could do? And by sharing that story, I really appreciate you sharing all aspects of it. And it really demonstrates how you took one thing you saw and go, okay, what is the small difference I can make? And then through conversation goes, oh no, I want this bigger. I want this impact. I can see how this can positively affect so many people. So let's take it a step further. And challenging too, in that story, you really highlighted too about how you can have conversations with people, in that situation, it's academia going and taking the time to go, okay, well, I am going to talk to the dean. Even if others go, well, the dean's not going to do anything. Why would you spend the time? Why would you reach out? You never know the answer. The answer will always be no if you don't ask the question. But get in the room and have a conversation, you never know. And I appreciate you sharing that aspect, because I think it's such an important takeaway and thought process for us all to have, is have the conversations and get that positive answer.
Yeah. Nia mentioned Series Fest, and we're doing a great event out there. I'm sure you're going to get to it, Olivia, but Series Fest is an amazing television festival that's been going on for 10 years in Denver, Colorado. It's massive. Last year, as a headliner to close the festival, they had a comedy festival, and Chelsea Handler was a headliner, and they've had Stevie Wonder and John Legend and all these amazing people, and that's to close. But what's amazing is they have these incredible independent TV pilots from young creators all over the country. I got to go last year and won a couple of awards with my short film Grown. So I built a rapport with everyone there, and the founders, and I'm this year on the advisory board. So my great publicist Sharon said maybe there's some synergy there with the University of Colorado medical students. And so what we've done is we put together a great screening and panel. We're going to do a screening of New Amsterdam with myself and creator David Schulner. That will be, and we'll also have Dr. Nia Mitchell there. We'll have Dr. Jandel Davis, who is the CEO of Craig Hospital. Dr. Albert, who is going to be there from the American Heart Association. And we're going to show a great episode of New Amsterdam, which is actually my favorite episode. It's in season 2, episode 6, called Righteous Right Hand. And we really dive into the whole disparities between African Americans and others dealing with healthcare. So we'll show that episode. We'll have a great conversation, and we're going to get right into this and just sort of make sure that we're raising the awareness of the importance of having Black doctors in our healthcare system. We definitely need to be increasing that. And by the way, the panel is going to be moderated by Van Lathan, who is fantastic. So, and just a quick plug. So go to seriesfest.com to find out more about that. May 3rd, I think it's Friday, May 3rd is the panel and the screening. It's going to be at 10:30 a.m. So get
11:30.
It's 11:30?
The panel is at 11:30.
The screening, the whole event starts at 10:30.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, so you make sure you have all those students there at 9:30.
Right, early.
We'll get our times down. But either way, go to seriesfest.com to find out more information. This is something you definitely don't want to miss if you're in the area, if you're in Colorado, and if not, hop on a plane, come say hello and support this amazing cause. And we'll get more specifically to the cause. I'm going to steer it back to you, Olivia.
Well, and I think it demonstrates how we can show up and teach individuals in different ways. We could bring awareness by showing up in ways that the community will really dive into. And, I hate to use the word latch onto, but really embody and go, okay, I connect with this. And I will stay on this just for a moment, because I do really love how you took that and are really collaborating and saying, how can we bring everything together to demonstrate in multiple different ways the discrepancies that are out there while making it engaging, taking the show and showing it from a television perspective, and so many things that people sit there and just watch without, they embrace it sometimes and have it thinking in their back of their mind, but they don't really engage in the same way as like, oh, that was thought-provoking. Now, how do I take that a step forward? And I love how
it's great because that's what their panel is about. It's called Dropping Gems, and it's about how New Amsterdam used masterful storytelling to inform its audience. And that's touching basically on what you're talking about there. We're definitely going to be informing them. And Dr. Nia, do you have something to do right after this? Do you have a meeting or something?
I do have something. Yes.
Okay. All right. So if it's okay, Olivia, can we dive into what okay. So first, just real quick, we'll talk about why it's important to have Black doctors, and we have some. First of all, I think there's Dr. Nia, you remember these stats: 5.7%
of physicians in the United States actually identify as Black or African American. And you might be like, okay, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that, the population in the country is might be between 13 and 15% African American. And so you can see that there is a discrepancy in the population of doctors versus the population. And so then you say, okay, well, why would that really matter? Well, we know that there are health disparities, and there are plenty of health disparities out there. But one of the things that we talk about is the fact that, more Black doctors could decrease the health disparity of cardiovascular deaths between Black and white patients by 19%, right? One of the most shocking statistics that, Jocko keeps going back to is like, Black newborns die at 3 times the rate of white newborns. But having more Black doctors means that Black infants are more likely to survive. Right. And so it's those types of things that's like, yes, this is why we need more Black doctors. Right. And so this is why it's so important for us all to be about this, because like more Black doctors means that, the life expectancy of Black patients is longer. And who could argue with that?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's good for the whole system and the healthcare system. It's good for insurance companies, insurance people out there. It's better if your patients are healthier. It makes sense. And it's a no-brainer. And what's crazy, we always talk about these disparities, but it's we often don't know what to do. And that's why I'm so thankful that Dr. Nia reached out with this opportunity to help the Black medical students at the University of Colorado. So, Doctor, can you tell us a little bit more about the Endowed? Well, you told us about how it started, but about maybe Charles J. Blackwood, who it's
Sure,
named.
absolutely. Once you start something, you're like, well, initially we named it for the Mile High Medical Society, which was the chapter for our local chapter of the National Medical Association. But we really wanted to connect to the history of Black students at the University of Colorado. And so, Terry Richardson, another member of the Mile High Medical Society, knew that the first Black graduate of the CU Medical School was Charles J. Blackwood, because she's like the historian for the Mile High Medical Society. And I'm like, what if we name it for that person? And so we found out more about him. So Charles J. Blackwood, and I'm hoping that Jocko will play him in the movie one day, that he graduated from CU Medical School in 1947. And so just think about that. Think about what the country was going through in the 1940s and what Black people in the country were going through at that time. And I just can't imagine, right? And so he wasn't allowed to be in the same classrooms as people. He wasn't allowed to live at the same places as his classmates. And yet still he was able to do really well and be in the top 10 of his class. And so, but again, in the 1940s. And so I think it is, a credit to, his like, what he did to be like, yes, we want to name this for him and move this forward for him. So everyone knows who he is, right? And that is a testimony to what he did in the past.
Yeah.
And I love that too, because it really shows where you start and the challenges one can have when you're the first. But look at, even with all the obstacles, he met that end goal. So how can you also do it? If he did it in that environment and everything stacked against him, he was still able to come out with the outcome he wanted, which was to be a doctor and be able to care for others. You have to then go, okay, if he was able to do it, how can I do it?
Absolutely. And you talked about representation, and this is what representation is, right? And so, like you said, he went through a lot more than, anything I ever went through in medical school. And he was able to do it. So, if he could stick it out, so could I, right? And so can other people. So absolutely.
Now, let's talk about a little bit, Dr. Nia, what goal we're trying to meet here and by what.
Absolutely. Okay. Yes. Thank you. So, as I said, we started, it was the whole, wanting to, raise $2 million. We got to that first million in February of 2021. And now we are at $500,000 away. So we have through June 30th of this year, so June 30th of 2024, to raise that second $500,000 to qualify for the match. So that's our big goal. We want to be able to qualify for the match. And so, I will say that the dean has been very generous in that. He's like, you know what, you guys have worked really hard at this. Even if you don't get to that, we're still going to match it, but we want to qualify for the match up to the $2 million. And he's even said that if people pledge to donate money over 5 years, that then he will even match that. So we are really focused on trying to get to that $500,000 by June 30th of this year.
And with that means since he's going to match the 2 million, that'll be 4 million. And that's just enough in the endowment so that we can pay for a full tuition every year for a Black medical student at the University of
every year, forever. And
forever.
that's the big deal, right? It's the in perpetuity piece that's really important. Right. Yes.
Right.
And I really want to highlight the words forever. That $500,000 that multiple people could take the time and put towards something can make such a long-standing impact.
Absolutely.
And we can all be struggling, but that small amount of money you can say, I'm going to put aside for this endowment, isn't just impacting today. It's going to impact generations to come.
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it, Olivia. Thank you.
And how do they contribute, Dr. Nia?
That is an excellent question.
I'm co-hosting with you, Olivia.
Yeah, exactly.
Love it.
Just in case Dr. Nia had to go.
All right. Yeah. So Jocko has put together a website called moreblackdoctors.org. And if you go there, and I will say we're working on the website, but you go there, there's a donate button, and that donate button will take you directly to the CU development website where you can donate to the Charles J. Blackwood MD Endowed Scholarship. And so moreblackdoctors.org, or as Jocko likes to say, hashtag moreblackdoctors. So moreblackdoctors.org, and you just click on the donate button, and then you can then donate to the scholarship fund.
And what I'm going to do too, I'm going to take it a step farther and make it even easier for our listeners to donate. Is in the description of this episode, there will be a link to that. So all you have to do is go into the description, click the link, and you can donate.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. So, Jocko, can you share ways if people, I know Dr. Nia just mentioned this, but other organizations, how they can get involved with paying it forward, not just with the endowment, but maybe even, can you mention how they could donate to the Elizabeth Dole Foundation?
Sure. Yes. For the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, just go to elizabethdolefoundation.org. It's a lot of information there. I like to go in there and just read and learn all the facts about caregivers. It's pretty incredible. As far as this with moreblackdoctors.org, she can also tell you about the Mile High Medical Society.org. Is that it?
Yes, milehighmedicalsociety.org. And when you click on the endowment page there, you can go and you can actually see a picture of Charles J. Blackwood when he was practicing back in the day. And you can also see a picture of the scholars that we have thus far and learn more about the story. So milehighmedicalsociety.org.
I love that. And that will also be in today's notes so people can go and really be able to connect and see, not just now, but in long term, the impact that the donation they're making is having, but also who those people are. Who are those people that will shape those next generations? Well, thank you, Jocko, and thank you, Dr. Nia Mitchell, for all of your insight today on so many topics. I said when we started this, I was like, this could probably go on for a few hours because we have so much to cover, but I think we were really able to share insights and get people thinking on everything we discussed today. So thank you both.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Really appreciate it.
And a few of our key takeaways from today's conversation is representation is important. I cannot emphasize this enough, is no matter where you are in your community, look around, take the time to take a step back and go, who's being represented in this room? Whose voices are being heard in this room? And if you don't think everyone is represented and being heard, they might be in the room, but their voices might not be being heard. Take a step back and help elevate those individuals so that their voices can be heard. We can all make the difference and we can all be the voice to make sure everyone is represented in all settings, whether they're in that room or not, as well as the fact that 5.5 million military caregivers are out there. And I think that's really important to think about. Like, that is a very large number. So take that and absorb that, as well as grace. You know, Jocko mentioned this, Dr. Nia mentioned this in her answers. Grace is so important to have, not just for others in our community, but for yourself as well, as you're struggling through things. You know, both of them mentioned PTSD, and we talked about that. Give yourself grace that when you're going through something you don't know how to navigate, that you take a step back and go, okay, what is going on? I need to give myself grace in this situation. But then also make sure that you're giving grace to individuals around you. You know, we talked a lot about Black doctors and Black patients and the importance of actually understanding and hearing their symptoms. There's so much medical differentials in how to care for Black patients and what resources are out there. So sometimes it's about listening and honing those listening skills to really go, they might not fit all the boxes, but it could still be the same cause, the same resolution. It might just look different. So take the time to listen. as well as the fact that 5.7% of physicians are Black. Dr. Nia Mitchell mentioned this fact, and she also mentioned the fact about how more Black newborns die every year than white. And part of that reason is because, as I just mentioned, the information isn't shared. People aren't sitting there and going, okay, what is the cause of this? And thinking outside the box sometimes, because symptoms can look different. So think about that as well. And when we talk about the stat of 5.7, I'm going to highlight that again. 5.7% of physicians are Black. That might seem like, okay, well, there's a lot of diversity in the group. Everyone has to have a piece of the pie. But that is still a low number, and that means a low number are advocating in the same way from experiences as the patients that are in front of them. This was a great episode with our top-notch guests, actor Jocko Sims and Dr. Nia Mitchell. Thank you for listening and have a successful day.